bit and chat us through what we're going to be going through in this session. I think it's fair to say this is going to be incredibly valuable. I know everyone thinks, oh, I kind of know how it works from when it comes to my phone, but you can shoot some amazing footage, and there is very soon to be a little film competition about filming from your phone. So watching this video will give you lots of hints and tips and lots of good ideas on how to do it. So James, I'll let you take it away.
Brilliant. So my name is James. Kate says I was at Durham. I left about 3.5 years ago now, and since then I started a production company with a friend of mine who's also a filmmaker at Durham, and we were lucky enough to travel around the world making lots of different films for various charities, companies, all sorts of things, which was a really amazing experience, and it's something that I learn how to do at Durham, and so hopefully I'll be able to at least impart some of that wisdom to you today. First of all, we've got 3 of you here. Have any of you done any filmmaking before, or is it something you're sort of interested in? See if any of you can.
Yeah, I've done a bit. Actually managed to do a bunch over lockdown, miraculously. I kind of interned for a couple of production companies, and I'm very interested in becoming like a film producer in the future. But I have a bit of a technical gap, so I'm trying to fix that basically.
Okay, and the other 2, I don't know if you can. No, what? So I think the first thing is, all right, I'm going to try and manage to share my screen, which hopefully you can now see. Can you see that, or have I just managed to cancel it here? Yeah. Brilliant. The first thing to say about filmmaking is don't panic. There's loads of technical stuff that sort of the people worry about. I know it's quite intimidating, particularly with when you've got big cameras and lots of people going around. It sounds difficult, but it's really not. And the key thing to do is always to keep calm, just sort of take a step back and stop. And the key to making a good film is telling a good story. So you need a story is what's going to drive your film forward, whether that it's just a little short film about your society, or that you're just trying to promote an event, or you're making like a narrative film, or you're making a document. Everything's always about the story. So the story comes first, and that's what you want to think about, and that story will should inform every decision you make going forward. And so filmmaking, it's just an extension of all sorts of other creativity, like a play, like writing. You're always trying to tell a story, and that's what you're doing when you make a film. And again, you don't have to be an expert, you don't have to be a brilliant writer. I'm certainly not a brilliant writer, but it's just thinking about saying, okay, what am I going to leave the audience with? And it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be done in a beautiful way. If you're creating emotion in your audience, it's been successful. Now I've got a little film here. Now, Kate told me yesterday when we tried this, it was really jerky when I played it back. So we'll try a bit of it, and if it's really jerky and rubbish, then we'll just stop. But this film, it's really it's a bit different, and it's sort of creating, it's really pretty, but it's creating emotion in a slightly different way, and I think it's something that there's lots of advanced techniques in there, but actually in the end it's quite simple. So have a look at it and just shout if it's not worth watching. Just shout, and you can always it's online, and it's you can go and have a look at it later on. And hopefully, if I've ticked the right button as well, you should be able to hear the sound from it. So let me know if you can hear this. I'll do that. All right. Let's.
When you shared your screen, did you do share with audio? Because that's the one thing.
There we go. Brilliant. Right. Attempt number 2.
Do you hear me? This is the voice of an imperial past. The sound of horses and the strong walk of men. Do you feel me? This is your cultural thrill. The smell of a powerful land. Can you see me?
Right, so that film it's a bit of a different film, but what I think that film does, it shows it's just that film in essence was a string of shots that didn't actually relate to each other at all, but was knitted together in such a way to tell a story and to create a feeling. And in the end, that's all you've got to do. They used sound brilliantly to tell the story and to add to those shots. So if you took that sound away, there wouldn't really have been anything there. So I think the first thing to take away is that filmmaking's the big thing to take away is it's all about story. And the second thing is that you need to use everyone's senses. You've got people's sound to play with, you've got what they see as well. So you've got to embrace all of that. And so what I'm going to do is going to take you through a sort of few steps along the way as to how you do that. I'm going to do particularly stuff on the pre-production and on the actual shooting, and then there's another workshop next week that's going to go into a bit more detail on editing, because that is a whole subject in its own right. Now we're going to sort of break it up a bit. and I've had to improvise a bit. I would normally do some of the lighting demonstrations in person with one of you, but instead we've got a teddy bear, and we're going to have to play around with it a bit. So we will, but we'll get to that in a bit. But the first thing is all about pre-production. So this is before you start shooting, and this is where a good film is made, because this is when you stop and you think. And right now you've got all the options open to you. You can take any decision you want to take. You can make a film however you want. As soon as you start shooting, you've committed to something. You've committed to one idea, and although you can change stuff around in editing, the film's going to come out roughly how you shot it. So you need to, pre-production is the time to really get thinking. And for most of this workshop, I put it in terms of this section's pretty general, but a lot of it applies to a sort of non-fiction film, because it's just a bit easier to define that, whereas a fiction film, they're all a little bit different, and each film is a bit more individual. With a non-fiction film, you can sort of apply a bit more of a structure, but the thought process is the same. So the first thing you need to do is set out your story. So what do you want your audience to come away from your film having discovered, having felt, having learned? So, you know, lots of the films that I used to make, we were advertising for people, and so we were, you know, saying, okay, we want someone to come away feeling like they want to go to that university, they want to donate to that charity. And so that end goal then needs to inform what you do as you step back through the process. So say you're doing a film for a society, for a freshers fair, like I'm sure lots of them have just done. You want people to join your society. So what do you need to make them feel to do that? You want, you know, to make it look good, show what you're going to do, show the friends you're going to make, that kind of thing. So that's going to inform it. And within your story, then you want to plan about, okay, how is it going to flow? It's, you know, a bit like that classic story sort of diagram that you we all did in like in English GCSE. You sort of want to do it like that. You're going to start with your you've got to start with your introduction. You've got to build it up, and then you're going to gradually build the emotion, build the tension, and then you're finally going to have a point where it's sort of where it pays off, and then you might look to the future. So say you were doing a film, maybe, so you'll see some of them coming up that I did. I'm going to use a few examples that I've done, just not necessarily because they're brilliant films, but because I can talk about them with a bit more experience. There are much better films out there, but anyway, we're going to use. I shot like a profile of someone, and so you're going to introduce them, and then you're going to build up their personality, build up their character, and then you're going to introduce people. So that this guy that shot a film with a guy who was a beneficiary of a charity in Mumbai. He had grown up in the slums of Mumbai and gone through lots of challenging situations with abuse, and is now a podcast producer and is now giving back to other younger men in Mumbai. And so you build up that emotion around the character, you build them as a person, and you help build in the audience mind this complete person, and then you see what he's doing for the future. So it's that sort of gradual build, and that's what you want to do. If you think about some of the adverts on telly, just even like the short little adverts, the really crappy ones don't have any story, they don't have any drive, they're very unengaging. But then you look at, like, a classic is a John Lewis Christmas advert. It's got story, and it's got emotion, it's got a narrative, and that's what brings it to life and makes it stand above some of the others. So story is first, and then next you sort of need to get into some of the practical characteristics. So, okay, you've got how you've got your story, and then you need to bring it to life for the screen. So you need to add the pictures to it. You need to think about what it's going to sound like. Where are you going to shoot it? Who's going to be in it? How are you going to bring this to life? So there's lots of different practical considerations, and I think pre-production is a time to take your time and do it as a process and do it as a team, because in the end, filmmaking for almost everyone, there's going to be a group of you around, because it's more fun that way. You get more done, and it's how the real world works. You're working in a team, and this is time to sit down as a team and go, okay, let's embrace all of our skills and all of our creativity to bring it to life. So we'll go a bit more into some of the visual technical stuff later on, but what you want your film to look like, so you can think about like, oh, do we want it to be quite stylish? Is that the right subject matter? Or do we want it to be quite like rugged? If it's a bit of a like, you think of some of the films in the cinema. I don't want to use Django as an example, but that's quite rugged. Or like Dunkirk, actually, Dunkirk is a better example of that. Where it juxtaposed its sides. You've got lots of the sort of action stuff that was like the camera was shaking, it was moving fast, it was about pacing. Then you open back up to some of the wider stuff, and that gives it a different feel. And so there's a real art to that. And while people spend their entire lives developing that craft and that art, you don't need to do that. For you, what you want to think about is keeping it simple and going, okay, I've got my phone, and these are the spaces I've got, and this is the resources I have. So, say if you want to make like a short film, you could maybe do a little like, phones are great for moving the camera fast, and it feels immediate and it feels present, and so you could use that to your advantage. And then you want to think practically about where you're going to shoot, and this is something that really trips people up. It certainly tripped me up when I was a student. We made all sorts of mistakes, and I think, just a side point, it's okay to make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes, and everyone makes some terrible films. I've made loads of terrible films, and that's okay. You'll make better ones. You'll learn much more from a terrible film than you will from a great film, because you'll learn like, oh, that just looked dreadful, and then you'll be able to learn from that, and you'll never do that again, or you'll never make that stupid mistake again. So it's okay to make terrible films. That's the one thing I will say. But yeah, so where you're going to shoot, think about what you can actually get to. Loads of people, particularly when writing short films, they'll say, oh, we're going to shoot in an office. Now in Durham, believe me, it's really hard to get into an office. I've tried, and it's really hard to find an office that looks good. And actually, if it's a bad set, then it's going to really lower the quality of the film. So you want to embrace what you can actually do. And in Durham, we've got this gorgeous city that you can use as your backdrop for non-fiction. It's amazing. It's beautiful to be able to shoot outside around the Bailey. And then if you hop in the car, hop on the bus, and you go up into the hills, you've got these incredible landscapes, both fiction and non-fiction, that you can use. But then it's quite hard if you set your film, in downtown New York. You haven't got the money to build a set, so you need to be realistic about that. And actually, if you're realistic, that will help you be creative as well, and engage your creativity and think, okay, this is what I've got at my disposal. How can I use that to make something really cool? And again, like Durham is just an incredible backdrop for that. I think certainly when I was a student, I didn't realize how lucky I was to live in Durham, in that beautiful city, and I certainly didn't make the most of it. And then alongside this, you've got to think, okay, who's going to appear in my film? If you're doing a documentary, you've probably already got your subject matter, but you need to find the right people. And we'll see later on that loads of films are structured around an interview. Certainly how most of my films have been structured around, where I've sat down and interviewed someone. And you need to have someone who's good on camera, and it's a real skill, and it's not easy to learn, and it comes naturally to some people, and to some people it really doesn't. People clam up, they just get uncomfortable, they don't open up, and so you really need to embrace and think about like who's going to come to life on camera, or if you've got one person you're focusing on, how am I going to bring them to life on camera? And that extends into doing fiction stuff as well with actors. You know, lots of people haven't acted for film, and it's a really different skill to acting for theatre. A great theatre actor, you know, the really good actors will be able to adapt to it. You just need to give them time and help them do that. You know, like in a theatre, they're used to acting for people who are 10, 20 yards away, or even further, right at the back of the theatre, where there is the film, you might have a camera that's, you know, right here, and so it's a really different skill, and they've got to embrace different ways. So that's what you want to think about as well. And then the other one is how long you want your film to be, and that is something that is really hard to decide. You got so many options. You know, you've got all the time in the world. You could make The Shawshank Redemption if you really want to. I suggest that you don't, only because for your patience, but you want to think about saying, okay, what is the most effective vehicle for my story? Is it something, certainly for the films that I make a lot of shorter films, sort of longest, like 4 minutes, and a lot that are shorter than that, because the story's good, but the story's not got the depth or the length to spin out too long, and the audience don't want to watch for much longer. You know yourselves, we're all, like on social media, we're all, you know, say on Facebook or Twitter, you're all just scrolling, and anything over 2 minutes, nah. So think about who you want to watch it, and where you want to watch it, and when you want them to watch it, and then think about your length. So if it's going on Facebook or Twitter, keep it short, keep it punchy, and then you can make it fast, and you can be creative, and you can bring in loads of energy. So I think but then if you're making a short film, make it longer. Or if you've got this incredible subject matter and you back your film, make it long, and that can be great as well. So you've got ultimate flexibility, you've got ultimate freedom to play around with all these different things, but you just need to think again about your audience at the end, and what you're trying to do, and what is going to best serve your story. Because again, it comes back to that. If you think of different films that have done it over the years, something like Birdman, where it went for its whole one-shot thing, which it was trying to bring across madness, to something like Dunkirk that has no dialogue in it. People have done so many different things, and it all sort of pans out in the end, and you just need to think about how your stories gonna work. Anyone got any more questions on pre-production, or anything you think I've missed, you'd like to know? No? Okay. So yeah, pre-production is your sort of initial stage, and once you're happy with that, you've got filmmaking is all about practicalities, and you've got to get your practicalities in line as well. You've got to get everyone where you want to be, when you want them to be there. Once you do that, you go into production. Now, Oh, I've got a few story tips. I'd forgotten I had this slide. Well, there we go. We're going to keep going. So one of the big story tips is remember that you can show people things. The difference between film and radio or writing is that you can show people things. You don't always have to tell them. So you can, you can, like, you don't have to say, oh, there were beautiful flowers or whatever in this garden you're making a film about. You can just show them the flowers, and the audience will go, yeah, I know that they're there, and you can illustrate things people are saying. So you don't have to labour the point. Say you're writing a voiceover, or say you're editing an interview. You don't have to labour the point if you've shown your audience something. So I'm just going to yeah, again, a film doesn't have to be long to be good. There's been loads of incredible films that are 2, 3, even shorter minutes. You think about all the adverts. So some of the adverts are really incredible pieces of filmmaking, and they are super short. So don't be afraid to make a short film. Make a good film instead. You can keep it short and brilliant. And following on from that is think about the pace of your film. Something like, I don't know if you know, a few years ago, Apple did that advert with the quick text quite a while ago now, where it was sort of popping out of the screen, and it was fast and it was aggressive, and that was great, but you couldn't have made that film very long because it was that one like intense pace. But actually you can play with pace, and you can build it up and you can slow it down, and you can help to do that to accentuate your story and the key points in your story. And you can, like we saw with that film we watched at the start, the pace went up and down, and that was helping to build the tension and then release it, and then build it and release it. And that's how you control what your audience is feeling and build the emotion. So you can, I think one thing that certainly is really easy to fall into the trap of is just get stuck in this one pace, whether it be really slow or really fast. And you want to try and play with it. And it's just a bit like when you're speaking, you know, you play with how fast you speak, and then you can slow it down and create a different feeling. So that's something to really be aware of all through your film, whether that be with when you're planning it and you're thinking about the story, when you're thinking about what shots you're going to use, and then when you come to the editing is when you really will play with the pacing. Next one is don't be afraid to copy an idea. You know, there's so many ideas out there, and it's really hard to have an original idea. If you see something you like on TV, on YouTube, in the cinema, when we can hopefully go back there soon, you can just steal it and adapt it and change it and put it in your own context, and that's absolutely fine. You know, don't worry about doing that. No one's going to come after you, and that will help you develop as a filmmaker by understanding how to enact these ideas and how to put them in your story, because in the end each film will be unique. You know, no one's ever going to make the same film twice. So yeah, don't be afraid to steal ideas. The other big one, which is really big, and you saw in that first film, is don't neglect sound. The biggest difference between a professional film and an amateur film is the sound. And it's particularly important with mobile phones. We'll come back onto that a bit more later. But these are lots of general tips, and these all apply with a phone. And that's something that I'd say to all of these things, is that just because you're using a phone doesn't mean you don't need to think about these, and thinking about these tips won't make your film better. So yeah, think about the sound. Think about how you're going to use it creatively. Think about how you're going to make sure that you can hear what people are saying. Think about how you're going to use it to tell your story. And think about how you can build up an atmosphere with it. You know, just simply adding in like some background sound to a scene can make a massive difference to how you feel. And like, so you know, say you're shooting a film in like a sports scene, if you just add a little crowd noise, it can bring it to life. And so those little creative things will really, really add to your film, and you want to think about those early on in the pre-production process. So then when you get to shooting and then when you get to post, you've thought about them and you know what you're going to do. Again, use movement. So whether that be physically the actors or you're moving the camera, like, you know, like now the camera is just sitting still, and that's not that interesting. I would love to have loads of cameras moving around. It'd be much more interesting. So move the camera, or move the actors, or move the person that's speaking if you're doing a non-fiction film. We'll come on to that in a second. One of those where I'll show you that. But the big thing is to be realistic, and it's not to stop you being creative. You know, that's what it's all about. You want to go out, you can think big, but you need to think big while understanding what you can and can't do. You know, you say, okay, I'm going to blow up the cathedral. It's great, and you could probably do it in post, but do you need to do that? And is it going to make your film better? So it's you want to think creatively about how your limitations, and often actually thinking about how you're going to work around those limitations and what you're going to do to change your story and change your style is what is going to bring your film to life and make it special. And that's the case, you know, right up to Hollywood. Everyone's got limitations, whether it be technology or budget or money or time, anything. So think about your limitations, and then you can be creative with how you're going to work around them. So here, the next sort of few slides, I've got 4 different films that I've made. One of them, this first one, embarrassingly, I also appear in, which are 4 different like structures that you might use. Now these are all non-fiction sort of promotional films, because again, a fiction film is quite hard to apply a sort of generic structure, but these are 4 different ways you could structure a little non-fiction story. They're all various lengths, they're various different styles, and they create a different impression. It's just about thinking, okay, what's going to serve your story best? And so this first one is, if you like, the classic style, which is an interview-based film where you've got a series of interviews with people that form a spine, and then you lay on what's called B-roll, which is these other like nice, pretty shots on top of those, and those are what's illustrating your point. And we'll see later on exactly how that ends up looking on an editing timeline later on. But yeah, so you'll see in this one, this is actually was part of a series of 8 films we made a film. Me and my business partner Will, who will also appear in here, we made a series of films about a climb of Kilimanjaro, and this was the day we got to the top. And we won't watch all of it, but we'll just watch the first bit, and you'll be able to, you can see, so the whole film and the drive of the story comes from those interviews, the emotion and the pace, and then the editing and the B-roll is used to illustrate and tell that story, and then you've got the sound added on top of it as well. So there's quite a lot going on, but this is a real classic structure, and this is something that if you're making a film about a society, or you're trying to do promotion film, or you're doing a documentary, this is how loads of stuff is structured, and is a really, really simple way of doing it. So we'll watch the first sort of minute or 2 of this one.
Hello, Will.
Morning.
Good morning, brother. How are you doing?
Yeah, good.
Did you have a nice sleep?
No. Yeah, Summit Day is probably physically and mentally the toughest day of my life, actually.
JT came and woke us up at 11 o'clock.
You're sort of wriggling out our sleeping bags, really not wanting to do it into the cold.
We all ate something and then wrapped up in every single layer we owned.
JT lined us all up and went through each of us individually, checked we were all right, checked we had the water, checked we had gloves, checked we had everything. And then we set off about 12:15, all with our head torches on.
There was a sort of line of people, like a big caterpillar with little lights.
It was pitch black, all you could see were the stars.
It was so dark that you couldn't tell where you were going, really, or how far you had to go. We were walking up switchbacks, and you could see about maybe 4 left and rights up ahead. And then you'd walk those 4, and there'd still be 4 up ahead.
You could see the horizon, but you walked to that horizon and that was not the top.
It was endless, and it wasn't a matter of covering distance. It was just, can I keep walking until the sun comes up? Because then I know I'll be near the top.
And eventually I saw the red line on the horizon, which meant the sun was rising and we were close to Stella Point.
Amba, 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 Amba.
7:15 in the morning, we got to Stella Point and the sun rose as we got there, which was absolutely amazing.
Something that I don't think I will ever forget. You're at Stella Point, you can see Uhuru just round the corner, and you know now that you can do it and you've got there. So that was, a couple of minutes of one of these films, and you can see there what we did was just use those interviews. So I'm sat behind the camera asking questions, and then the answers that those questions get are what we use to drive the narrative. And so you want to think of the questions in advance. And I would say that the top tip when you're interviewing, which is quite a skill, is to ask the stupidly simple questions, because actually you'll generally, and certainly I find, the big emotional questions you'll remember to ask, but often I found myself in the edit going, oh crap, I didn't ask what we were doing that day. I didn't ask where we were going, what time we got up. So stuff like that, the simple questions are what you need to set up a film. But that style is applicable to almost anything, works really well, and gives you a lot of freedom to express yourself as well. And the B-roll is what brings in the movement, brings in the reality, helps add a load of credence to what the interviews are saying. So there you could see we were talking about the time we got up, and then you see someone waking up, you see us at breakfast, you see us doing all these things, and that's what adds the credence to what they're saying. So that style, you look at it on TV, you'll see it all the time on the news, documentaries. Great style, I love it. One of my personal favorites. Right, next one. This one is a bit of a challenging style, but this is trying to bring to life something that is really, really boring. It's called a walk and talk, and it is exactly what you think it is. It is people walking, talking straight to camera. And it's not that it sort of sounds very easy, and it's a lot harder to pull off than you think. I certainly failed a few times to do that. But this is one of the ones that worked. And it's just a way to impart a load of information in a way that keeps it moving, keeps it alive, and the movement, again, brings it to life. So rather than, although this one does have some B-roll, they don't have to. Rather than with the interviewer using the B-roll to bring the movement, here you're moving the subject. And these tend to be scripted, so you've written your script in advance, and that is really helpful. If, in this case where we're talking about a charity and a campaign, you need to be precise about what you're saying, and so you can plan it and you can hit the key message points, which is something you do a lot when you're working for businesses, but also, again, you can do a lot when you're working with societies. And this is something that would be great to do through the Bailey, because it would be beautiful. And that's what you want. You want somewhere pretty, you can show it off. This would be really special. So what's the first couple of minutes of this? There's some technicalities to this that we'll talk about afterwards as to exactly how to do it.
Festivals are a vital and inspiring part of our culture. For many of us, the events we organise are both our livelihoods and our passions, but as most of us know, they do have environmental impact. Impacts such as the fuel we use on site, transportation, waste, our supply chains, and many others. Powerful Thinking is a not-for-profit and collaborative industry project that has been working with festivals and events for over 10 years to better understand our environmental impacts and to support organisers to make positive changes. In 2015, we published the Show Must Go On report. It brought together everything we knew at the time about the environmental impacts of our industry and provided a robust basis for industry-wide action. It also launched the Festival Vision 2025 pledge.
The pledge asks events to cut their carbon emissions by 50% by 2025, and it provides the advice and resources to help them achieve that. More than 75 events have signed up to the pledge so far, and we're hoping that many more will join them. The festival industry continues to...
Right, that's enough of that. You can see that is some really dry material. There's not much emotion going there. There's not much happening. It's lots of people talking, but just by making them walk, it brings a bit of action to it, and it brings a bit of life to the scene. So that's what a walk and talk does. The key thing to do that, and it's really hard to do, is to move the camera smoothly. So you've got, for that, I'm walking backwards, holding the camera on a thing called a gimbal, which helps keep it steady. And we'll talk a bit more about that later, but the way you do it is you have to walk like Donald Duck. So you've got to like shuffle, and you've got to keep your feet on the ground, and you've got to move really smoothly and try not to bounce up and down, because that's what it gets really distracting. So you've got to shuffle back. Not very easy to do, requires a bit of practice, but in Durham would be brilliant. And with the phones, they've got a stabilizer built in. You can get some other stuff to help stabilize them. And that would be really, really doable. And again, a way to you could do it. This one was quite long. I would do it a bit shorter. You can use some other B-rolls, add to it so you can hide cuts. That's what we did there. That's why there's lots of B-roll in it, because people are cutting, because it's not that easy for people to remember a script precisely, and people do get it wrong. But that's another little bit of a different one. Again, you see that on telly a lot, particularly on the news. People do that all the time.
Grow alongside.
Now this one is a bit more fun. This one was actually for Durham. The next two were for Durham. And this one, it's another scripted piece, but it's standing still. And then we've used a bit of creativity, a bit of pace to bring some energy to it. And this one, there's lots and lots of sound design in it. And the sound, again, is trying to bring it to life. And this one shows how valuable a script can be. Scripts are really, really helpful, again, to really, you can tailor your message beforehand. So as in an interview, the answers are always organic, although you can talk to a participant and sort of try and poke them to what you want. In the end, the answers are always going to be organic. With a script, you know exactly what you're going to get. And that can be really time efficient. So if you've written your script beforehand, you go out and you shoot exactly what you're going to shoot. And if you haven't got that much time, this is a great way to do it. And again, in the edit, you just structure it, you've got your script next to you, you chuck it all in, and then you know what you're going to get. So there's a lot to this one, and it's a great format. And exactly like a fiction film as well, you've got a lot of control. So watch this one.
We are Britain's #1 team sport university.
We run Britain's largest student participation programme.
We host 2,500 community members every week.
But Team Durham is more than that.
We're built on teamwork.
We grow our own leaders.
Find a cake. And forge strong partnerships.
Sport at Durham is for everyone.
We help students try new things.
uncover their talents.
And stay fit and well.
Leg up.
Here in the Northeast, we support each other.
We give back to our community.
And make sport available to everyone.
Here at Durham, we inspire the extraordinary. What will you do?
So that one, you can see that was super scripted. We'd written it all beforehand, and then we had some student athletes help us out and perform it. And so it's a really handy tool. Again, you'll see people do it all the time. Lots of businesses do it. Quite easy to do badly. You do really need to think about how your script's going to be and how you're going to make it sound natural. To be honest, I'm not sure we did a brilliant job there. Some of it was a little bit staid, but that is part of learning to do it. Is trying, you want to try and make it feel like there's not actually a script. But that was short and pacey. We got a load of information over in a very short time. That was 1 minute. And hopefully you learned, I'm sure you already know it now you're at Durham. But what we're trying to do is put over a lot of information in a way where you don't necessarily know that's what's happening. And again, the next film is a real example of that one. So this one was for Collingwood, which was my college when I was at Durham. And this one is basically, this is all sound and vision. There's no script, there's no dialogue. This one is all about imparting information without necessarily telling the audience that's what you're doing. So we're trying to sort of subtly show people what's there. This film, this structure is a big show, not tell. So you should come away from here knowing what Collingwood has to offer without having actually been told it. And that's something that people get wrong a lot. You'll see that from all sorts of people, is people tell you something, whereas actually you can just show it and it's a lot more interesting. So we'll have a look at this one.
And legs up.
So again, that was another really short and punchy one where we, hopefully we're trying to show, not tell. Right, so that was a load of creative stuff, and that, as with this first two things, was quite general, but the principles that apply to filmmaking on a phone are exactly the same as for anyone else, as for when I'm working, or when Steven Spielberg's on Hollywood says, it's all about combination of fusion and structures and styles. So hopefully that really helped you to think about how you would structure your film. Now we're going to go on to a bit of how we make it look. And the first thing is a bit of composition. And the picture we've got on the screen is the classic rule of composition, which is the rule of thirds. And so what it is a frame is split into threes, and so you've got your threes horizontally and your thirds vertically and your thirds horizontally. And what you can do is give horizontally, if particularly, so this example is a landscape example, and that's where it's easiest to show it. You give each element its own part the frame horizontally. So you've got the sea in the foreground, and then you've got the icebergs in the middle, and you've got the sky at the back in each third. And then you want to put, if you've got like a key point in the frame, you want to put it on a join of those thirds. So you can see there the wolf is on one of those joins. And so that is the real classic rule of composition. And filmmaking, you know, you look online and you look, there's, you know, people say there's loads of rules, and the rules are there because they look nice and look pretty, but if you want to break the rules, as long as you've got a reason to do it, you should do it. So like quite often, you can short side an interview composition, and I'll show you that in a second. But that is some really basic composition. And I think now we're going to try and use the teddy bear to do a bit of lighting and a bit of composition. Now, I'm going to try, and hopefully you're going to be able to hear me. But when I go over there, if you can't hear me, just shout, okay? But hopefully you can hear me. So you can see here, what I've done is I've set up the teddy bear. There's a camera behind the screen, which is just over here. And you've got the light that's just up there that is that's lighting the teddy bear. And so at the moment, I've got it set up in a sort of really classic lighting position. And now this is something that you don't need to use the light to do, you can use the sun to do. So when you're out and about thinking about your composition, when you're thinking about your shots, you also need to think about the sun. So at the moment, our teddy has got a lovely shadow just over here. And that shadow is giving him a bit of depth and a bit of perception. You can see that there's a nice shadow just across the middle of his face. Not too much, so there's still some light on both eyes, but there's a bit of a shadow, and that gives him a bit of depth and a bit of profile and helps bring him to life, and doesn't make him look like a pancake if the light's right in front of you, which I'll show you in a second. Or it doesn't make him look like a silhouette when the light is right behind you. And with phones, this is quite important because phones aren't quite so sensitive as like the big camera I've got hiding behind the screen. So you want to, you do need to think about it. And the best light, particularly when you're outside, is the sun. And so you just want to think about how you angle things up to the sun. I know the northeast isn't always sunny, but when it is, that's what you want to think about. So I'm just going to move this light, and hopefully we'll show you what a really flat light looks like. So you can see there that I've now moved it straight in front, and this really looks like I'm interrogating the teddy. But you can see there's no real shadow here. It's just super flat, and it makes Teddy look like a bit of a pancake. And so, okay, there's a bit of a shadow here, but that's because the light's up above him. So the light is sort of simulating the sun for you. And that's really not what you want. So you want to think about getting that sun just like a little bit across it, and that will really help. But the big no-no is this. So that's the light right behind him, and it looks quite cool. But if you're trying to do an interview, if you want to hear from Teddy, that is not what you want. You can see you've got no light on his face or on his body, and if it was a little bit darker, you just wouldn't see it. Particularly on a mobile phone, you're not going to see. It's just going to be black. So that's really something to think about. And I know this sounds quite intimidating, quite daunting, but you really don't need to worry too much about it. It's really common sense. Once you're out there and doing it, you just need to stop and think and go, okay, what's going on? Let's have a look at the shot and just see, where's the sun? Where's the light? Is it on our contributor's face, or is it behind them? Are we going to have a big sort of silhouette And unless that's what you want to think about, okay, we're going to move. So that was just a few really simple things, and with phones, that's really, really important. And then the other thing is just moving the camera, and there are sort of a few couple of basic moves. There's the tilt, where you tilt the camera up and down, or there's the pan, where you pan the camera left and right. And those two moves, believe it or not, can really bring it to life. Can really bring a film to life and elevate the film. So say you were doing a walk and talk, perhaps you could pan down off the cathedral onto your contributor, and that's brought a load of life, a load of energy, and it's really easy to do with your phone. To do a pan down, all you're doing is that. Nice and simple, super steady, easy as you like. And then you can pan left and right. So maybe you could just turn the camera to reveal something. And those little moves can just bring it to life. So that's some of the technical things you can do, and some of the terminology there. And this, again, this all applies to all sorts of filmmaking, whether it be with a big camera or a phone. Proper lighting, or just thinking about your lighting and thinking about moving the camera will make an enormous difference. And that's what is going to make the difference between you, someone who's thought about it, and someone who's just grabbed their phone. And the golden rule that I really should have talked about earlier, but actually I haven't, is always film with your phone landscape. Always, just flat rule, always landscape, okay? Always like that. Never like that, because this can go on any screen. You can take the middle bit if it needs to go that way, whereas this is going to look terrible on any other screen. Always landscape. I'm sure I say this in one of the slides later on. Now, one of the things when you're thinking about coming to editing is you need to make sure you've covered a scene, because to give yourself the ability to edit, to make a cut in the footage and to jump time, and we'll see more about that later on, you need to be able to have different angles and different things to cut to, otherwise you're just going to have jump cuts, and unless you're going for that look, jump cuts just look weird. It doesn't work. So on the right is a coverage, is a picture of scene coverage. Now this is really complicated and you don't need to worry about it too much, but what you can see is you can see the little green cameras, and you can see the different angles that they've set up there, and those different angles are what coverage is. So say you can see you've got a camera on the left and a camera on the right, and that means that you can cut between the two, and they'll work together. So then you could edit. So say you're doing an interview and the interviewer gives a bit of an answer you don't like. You're like, oh, it's not interesting. Cut that out, and you can just cut to the other camera and then cut back, and no one will know that that's ever happened. It will sound like the interview's there. So in all those films I showed you, there's loads of cuts which are hidden by other angles or by B-roll. So that's what coverage is, and coverage sounds really complicated, but the key to coverage is when you say, okay, I'm going to shoot something, is to shoot it from multiple angles. So say, right, I was going to shoot an interview with me now, I would put a camera just there, so that then there's a camera here pointing this way, but then I'd probably put a camera just maybe over here, so that then you could cut from that camera to that camera. And maybe I put a camera behind me or something to see what's in front of me. So that is coverage, and coverage really helps, and it gives you multiple takes and multiple angles. And as part of coverage is getting multiple takes. you know, it's very unlikely your first take is going to be perfect. Filmmaking takes time, and it's not easy. So you need to get multiple cuts, multiple takes of something. So you need to make sure that it's covered at more than once, and that it's covered from different angles so you can cut together. And there's a really nice, particularly this is a bit of a non-fiction style, but if you Google the BBC 5-shot technique, it's a little technique that is a way to cover a scene where you start with a mid-shot, which is sort of someone from the waist up, and then you get a wide shot, which is getting the whole scene in. And those wide shots, never neglect them, because that's how you're going to set the scene. And then you get a close-up, so right in, you've got the camera like right in here, right, maybe if someone's like making something right in with their hands. And then you've got a different angle, so to mix it up. And then you also go around behind them. So that technique works really well and is a great way to learn it. And there's some really good diagrams and stuff online to explain that. But we're going to have to keep moving, because otherwise I am not going to get through my slideshow. So the big tip is to keep the camera steady. One of the big differences between professional and amateur footage is that the camera is always steady, unless it deliberately does not want to be. You want to make sure that the camera is steady, whether you put it on a tripod or you just put it down. You want to make sure the camera is steady. With phones, they've got stabilizing, but it's not that easy. And what you want to do is, it's really hard to hold the camera steady like this. You want to tuck your elbows in. If you can't put it on a tripod, tuck your elbows in like that, right into your body, and you just breathe nice and slowly, and you keep it steady. And that will make a massive difference. And you don't want it bouncing, and you don't want the camera going like, you don't want it covered by your finger either. You don't want the camera going like left and right and left and right. You want it to be steady and still, and if you're going to move it, you move it slowly and smoothly, just like that. So yeah, you don't want it bouncing around. So that will make a massive difference, keeping it nice and steady. And then if you are going to move it deliberately, it's really hard to move it steadily and smoothly. Steadily and smoothly without some equipment. And you can get a gimbal if you've got a little bit of money to spend. There's some really good ones online, which is a piece of electronic equipment. You put your phone in it, and then it will keep the phone moving, and you can move the handle of the gimbal like this, and the phone will stay steady. And so it won't roll like that. It will stay nice and smooth, and that is what we used to do something like that, walk and talk, and that makes life a lot easier. But the humble selfie stick, particularly for phones, is a really good alternative, just to give you a bit more to grip on, and again to tuck your elbows in and keep it nice and steady. And with that Donald Duck shuffle I was talking about earlier, that can actually create some really good results. Give yourself time. That is one thing that I cannot stress enough. Filmmaking takes time, and stuff goes wrong. And if you're under time pressure, it's a lot harder. If you allow yourself longer than you possibly think, you're going to have a much more relaxing time, and you'll be able to finish early. And that's great. But if you're under time pressure, it's difficult, and it gets complicated, and you're having to compromise on things. So allow yourself plenty of time to shoot and to get out there. The next thing, and this is a bit more of a technical thing, but loads of phones these days can do silly, 4K or whatever, which is the sort of top resolutions, and that's great. But really think about what you're actually going to need. Most screens still are HD 1080p screens, and 4K uses lots of battery power, uses lots of storage, and you probably don't need it. So don't worry too much about that. I would suggest just shooting everything in 1080p. It's going to be a lot easier, particularly on your phone. Battery is really important. Storage is really important. You can't change a battery like I can in my big camera. So you need to make sure that you take care of your battery, and maybe get a power pack as well. I've talked about it loads of times already. Sound is so important. If you're filming an interview and there's a building site next door, move. It's just gonna sound terrible. Or if you're, if there's a siren going past, just stop the take, pause, let it go, start again, because you will be amazed at the things you hear. And because you can't see the explanation on screen, if you can't see what's causing the sound, it's really distracting. And you'll notice that all the time. So take care with your sound. If you're on your own, make sure you've got some headphones that are plugged in and you're listening, and then you'll know when the sound's not very good. And if you've got someone with you, have someone else just listening to the sound and being like, that wasn't good enough, we need to go again. And then the other thing, and I've been guilty of this many times, is saying, oh, we'll fix it in the edit, it'll be fine. It's never fine. It's always a nightmare. It takes ages. So just if you think, oh, I can fix something now, then fix it and do it and get it done. Much better. Right, now filmmaking is, lots of people, me included, are obsessed with kit, and you don't need anything more than your phone to film effectively, but there are some things that help you. One thing is an app called Filmic Pro, which is a little app you can get on your phone, and it just helps you. There you go, it's going to boot up. So it's like that, and it's got a few professional exposure tools, things like you can lock the shutter speed and you can keep it so the exposure isn't going to change all the time in the middle of a take, and that's really handy. There's loads and loads and loads of YouTube tutorials on how to use it. Really recommend it if you're going to be doing quite a bit of filming on your phone. Really, really good. A tripod, on from keeping the camera steady, and a gimbal, but particularly a tripod. The ability to put your phone down somewhere and know that it's not going to move, and then you can concentrate on doing some of the other things that you need to do, and you're going to get much better footage. So again, if you can get a hold of a tripod, even a little one that can just go on a table, massive difference. Talked about a gimbal already. Again, if you're doing a lot of this stuff, really handy. Something that is almost, I would almost say it's vital, is a microphone. The microphones on phones are crap. They're really, they don't have any directional control. They're not very sensitive. They're really bad. You could get some really good ones off Amazon for not too much money that plug into the headphone jack, and they're called like a directional shotgun mic, and they are great. And they'll just make the sound a lot better and a lot more controlled. A light, you've seen the difference light can make on our model here. So you getting hold of light, you can just get little tiny ones that clip on your phone, can make a massive difference. Just to your scene, and particularly when it's dark, like it often is in Durham in the winter, you might need a light. Phones, the quality is very good, but they do need a lot of light to be effective. So if you can get yourself a little light, you can persuade your society to get you a little light that you can put on your phone or get someone to hold, will add a massive difference. Make a massive difference. And the last two are a couple of nice little things. You can get some lenses that clip on the front of your phone here, clip on the camera, and will help give you a different angle, different perspective. And you can get a little extension cage that sort of goes round the phone, which helps you clip all this stuff on. Those are, okay, nice to have, but a couple of other ideas. Now, editing, we're going to fly through this because there's another workshop on this, which is much going to go in way more depth later on. But the first thing I say about editing is that YouTube is your friend on the technical side. YouTube has got an amazing resource of loads and loads of great tutorials for almost every editing system out there. There are loads of them now. Loads of them are free, loads of them are great. I picked out 3 free ones that I have used and I've heard are really good. So iMovie you can get for free on a Mac. It's great. It's a great intro. Super easy. There's loads of tutorials. Windows Movie Maker, again, the latest ones are really good. Loads of tutorials. And if you're really wanting to get into editing in the future, there's a program called DaVinci Resolve, which is basically a professional editor that's made for free. And there's a million tutorials online. It's great, but it's quite complex. But I really recommend for starting out iMovie and Windows Movie Maker and using all the tutorials. Now, all these editing softwares, they all work in a similar way, although they look different. They're all based around a timeline, and what's on the screen at the moment is a timeline, and it's built of lots of different levels. And this this particular screenshot you've got up here is a timeline from a film that I shot a couple of years ago. We'll see it afterwards. But this is an interview-based film, and you can see what I was talking about earlier about how there's a spine from an interview-based film. That spine is what's labeled video 1, that first track with all the multicolored bits on it. Now, it looks very intimidating, but it's actually just a way of me organizing each different interview. But yeah, so you've got so that is interview, and you can see in there, again, I was talking about earlier, all the cuts, and the cut is what is an editor's tool. That's what you're going to use to tell your story. Because so in this film's just over 3.5 minutes. I did about 5 hours of interview for this film. So there's loads of interview footage that I've cut and used it to make the film. And lots of these cuts will be, you know, the thing might have each cut, the piece of footage on each side of each cut might have been 10-20 minutes apart, but by using B-roll, which is what's laid on top in the track label video 2, that is the pretty footage I was talking about earlier and helping to illustrate it, and that is covering my cuts, and so that is enabling me to edit. And all editors work in the same way. You start with video 1, which is your first track, and then as you build up through video 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on, whatever you lay on top is what you see. So whatever is the highest piece of footage up the timeline is what you see. So in this case, if anything that's on video 2 is going to be seen above, on top of what is on video 1. So that's how you hide things. And editing is, again, like cinematography, people dedicate their whole careers to editing and to its craft, but in essence it's really simple. What you're doing is making cuts to tell your story. And again, you want to, when you're doing this, you get your script or your pre-production notes, whatever you're planning, and you just put them down by the side of you and you edit to them. And so you're going to create and construct your film on this timeline. And so this was the film, that timeline, this is what results from that. And we'll just watch a couple of minutes or so of this.
I think the sea is ultimately very forgiving. It absorbs all our problems. But it can't do so indefinitely. So far it's absorbed all these emissions, it's absorbed the Earth's warming, it's absorbed all the crap we put into it, but it's not going to last forever. It'll spit it back out.
We need to make that connection between our everyday lives on land and the pollution crises in the ocean.
The first time I really emotionally connected with marine plastic was when the spring tide brought a whole line of plastics on the beach that's dearest to me, which is Sennan in Cornwall. And it was a shock to be in a place that I've known for so many years of my life and to see it so covered in plastic. It was a real dramatic moment of this really is different.
In 2016, 335 million tons of plastic has been produced, and 10% of this ends up in the marine environment. 5% ends up on the beach, but amazingly, so 1% is on the ocean surface and 94% is on the ocean floor. A nurdle is the raw material for every plastic product made. They are just small pellets which are melted into products. So it makes your water bottles, your plastic bags, just everything. So there's billions of these manufactured every day. And unfortunately, lots of these end up in the environment from shipping spillage and through manufacture, just spilled out straight into the drains, straight into the water.
And once ingested, the toxins release, so you get starvation.
So you can see from that film what comes from that timeline that I showed you back on that last slide. You can see how I've controlled the story, how I've manipulated it, and how I've built it up and layered it up. And editing in the end is all about layering up. But that is a real whistle-stop tour of editing. There is another workshop next week. I'm sure Kate knows more about that. But also YouTube is your friend. I learned most of my editing from YouTube. There's loads of resources out there. There's loads of great channels that actually do in-depth more on the creative side. There's a really good YouTube channel called Lessons from the Screenplay. And some of the videos are a bit long, but they do some really interesting insights into how Hollywood and professional filmmakers have used these techniques to build up their story. There's some great stuff about like Game of Thrones. Brilliant. Really recommend it for the creative side of it. We're not going to watch it. So a few final things from me is number one tip: don't panic and keep smiling through it. You'll be fine. Sometimes everything feels like it's about to fall apart and the schedule's falling apart and it's all going wrong and you can't get the shot. And if you just pause, stay calm and think creatively about your options, you'll often come up with something better. And those moments are what will make you better as a filmmaker and help you learn. So just keep on going. Don't panic. Take your time in pre-production. Really think about exactly, and I mean exactly, what you want your audience to come away with. And if you're working with someone, maybe you've not worked with them before, sit down with them and communicate clearly with them. Write stuff down, do storyboards, because so often, particularly if you've not made many films before, if you're working with someone who hasn't made many films before, people struggle to picture in their head exactly what the final product is going to look like. So make sure that you've written down and thought exactly what the final product is going to look like. That's going to massively help to reduce stress in editing. And it's not easy. If you can draw, storyboards are 100% the way to go. If you can't, you can write stuff, just talk about it. And then be creative. You know, it's all about being creative, and these last two are quite linked. Trust your creativity and just, you know, if you think you've got a great idea, then go for it. Keep going, you know, listen to other people, understand what they're saying, but if you're sure that you've got it right, then you can go for it and do it, and be creative around your limitations, be creative around what your strengths are, and use what's around you. You know, you can do lots of incredible things with your phone, and you know, if you're maybe if you, and just ask or be creative with the people who you're filming, if you're making a non-fiction piece, or be creative with your story. So you can really go for that. Now, I think that is pretty much it from me. My contact details are there on the screen if you would like to email me any questions or anything more you would like to ask. Just anything, or if you want any help, then feel free to get in touch. Has anyone got any questions now? Okay, well, I think that's it from me. Hopefully, I think I finished a couple of minutes early, but hopefully Kay's going to reappear in a minute. And thank you very much for listening.